From Fox 8 Sports, this is the Overtime Podcast.
From the Fox 8 studios in New Orleans, this is the Fox 8 Overtime Podcast. I am your host, Sean Fazende, riding shotgun as he does each and every podcast is Andre Johnson
Jr.
Do not forget the JR on the end of the name. It's very important. But before we get into today's content, be sure to like, share, rate, and review. If you are watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Get the bell notification for when we drop that fire content. And today, we have another episode where, you go into a day, you go into a week, you go into a feeling of how a certain thing's going to go, and then all of a sudden a curveball gets thrown at you. You have to take a hard pivot because normally we would talk about on a podcast like today where the Saints closed out the offseason and the starting quarterback who's been fantastic and the offensive coordinator talk to us for the first time in a while. That will be something we would talk about in this podcast, but we're not doing that today. Normally, when the starting tight end has surgery and is going to miss quite a bit of time, that would be something we would get into on a podcast like this. Not going to be able to happen today. Taysom Hill restructured his contract. I have some thoughts. We're not going to be able to get into that today because our big picture item is going to go to one man because of all the things that developed today. This was the one that caught a lot of us off guard. Why don't you take it from here?
Yep, Saints running back Alvin Kamara was absent on the last day of Saints minicamp. He actually took part in the early morning walkthrough, but when we actually got to the practice portion, Alvin Kamara had already left the building, and it's being reported that the whole deal is because of a contract dispute. It was a really awkward scene when we got there and found that out, Sean.
There's no doubt about it. Talk about a bizarre scene, an awkward scene, but a very, very, very calculated move by Alvin Kamara. He knew exactly what he was doing when clearly he went to practice today, participated in the walkthrough, at some point goes back into the building, at some point goes and talks about presumably someone in the front office about his contract matter. Clearly didn't get the answer he had hoped, so he got dressed, walked back down into the exited the building, got in his car in the parking lot where we all park, and right before we were all about to go out to the practice field, he exits, not to be seen again. So remember, he missed all of OTAs and was available Tuesday and Wednesday for practice 1 and practice 2 of minicamp. We even said how much better he looked in Wednesday's workout at minicamp practice number 2. So that happens, Saints practice. News comes out. We were thinking, what's going on here? Contract related. And I got to be honest with you, this was something that, looking at all the contract scenarios, I didn't necessarily see this as a big extension type situation, especially since really nothing ever really kind of been leaked about it. We've seen just around the league, there are people missing mini camps due to contracts, and you just hadn't really seen that from Alvin Kamara, especially since he attended the first 2 days of practice. In fact, DA had no idea the reason why Alvin Kamara bolted and exited. He said he was here for the walkthrough. Then we came back out for practice, and I haven't seen him since. We are the people literally at the press conference telling Dennis Allen the reason why he had left practice due to a contract-related issue, because at that point, he hadn't talked to Alvin. He's the head coach. He's dealing with a practice with a lot of players, a lot of issues happening. He just hadn't talked to Kamara at that point. So by the time he talked to us, he really had no idea why Kamara had left and did not attend practice. But that was the reason. Multiple sources have certainly confirmed this, that Kamara is looking for an extension or a new contract from the original contract he had signed back in 2020. It was on paper a 5-year, $75 million contract, but when you kind of looked at the fine print, it really was a 4-year, $50 million contract, and it was the same wave of running backs that got paid. Remember, there was that real, over the last couple of years, about running backs not getting paid and not getting fair market value. Well, this was the last group that got paid. McCaffrey got paid that offseason. Derrick Henry got paid either that offseason or the offseason before, and Alvin Kamara got paid as well with a 4-year, $50 million contract or a 5-year, $75 million contract. But everyone knew by the time it got to that 5th year that was always going to be renegotiated because there's no guaranteed money in that 2025 deal. So 2024 is the final year of his contract, and Alvin, I guess, wants some security going into his 8th season in the NFL.
Yeah, and you mentioned all of those running backs, and you gotta wonder. Obviously, you never know unless Kamara says it, but you gotta wonder. A week ago, a running back who Alvin Kamara gets compared to a lot got an extension. Christian McCaffrey, reigning Offensive Player of the Year, 2 years, $19 million per year was given to Christian McCaffrey. Now, you can certainly say that Alvin Kamara isn't producing on the level of Christian McCaffrey, seeing that Christian McCaffrey just got announced he's on the cover of Madden. He's Offensive Player of the Year. Alvin Kamara coming off 2 of the worst years of his career if you compare it to the rest of the seasons that he's had. But, I mean, even Austin Eckler got $5.5 million over 2 years when he went to Washington, and he was also in that draft class with AK and CMC. So I think Alvin Kamara, he's really looking for, number one, the money. He wants the dollar signs to line up because if you ask him, I think that he would tell you he's right there with Christian McCaffrey. I think that he believes that, and he wants the security because that running back position, Alvin Kamara is 28. He turns 29 next month. There are a lot of positions where that may not be a big deal, but as a running back, that's seen as pretty much the tail end of your career.
Yeah, and look, at 29 years old, which is what he'll be playing at for the 2024 season, given where he's at, given this new offense, given the player he's compared to most, like you said, with Christian McCaffrey, just getting that 2-year, $38 million extension. This is really Kamara's last chance at a payday that's going to be a sizable payday, not a 1-year, $2 or $3 million contract for the rest of his career like a lot of running backs do once they hit a certain point. So right now, he's exercising the last bit of leverage that he has. And look, I have absolutely no problem with a player trying to get paid, trying to get a new contract. It's a brutal sport. It's a brutal position. He's taken a lot of hits. He's been injured over the years, but he's been mostly available for the Saints. And when he's played, even in quote-unquote down years, he's been productive. But one cannot ignore the dip the last 3 years of his career versus the first 4 years of his career, which, by the way, he signed that original contract in 2020 after the first 4 years of his career when his market value was at its absolute peak. Now he's 29. He's not going to get a 5-year deal or a 4-year deal. The most I could see the Saints doing is, like I said, next year he's technically on the books for $23 or $24 million base salary that's completely unguaranteed. We know the Saints are not going to pay that. The Saints are not going to pay $23 million for one season for Alvin Kamara. He clearly wants some form of a guarantee or is in the market for a new form of a guarantee for next season, this year and next year. So what could the Saints do? Do they match the Christian McCaffrey numbers? I could see the Saints trying to avoid that. If I'm the Saints,
$19 million a year is a
19's a lot, and I'm sure that contract is structured in a way that may not exactly hit the cap by $19 million. I'm talking about Christian McCaffrey, and the Saints could certainly do that, but Kamara knows he's still got enough to play, and we saw him. And like you said, he still feels like he's on the level of a guy like Christian McCaffrey, even though I think you can reasonably look at their careers and say, though they're comparable in skill set, McCaffrey's had a slightly better career overall than Alvin Kamara. But still, he sees himself in that vein. Clint Kubiak certainly sees Alvin Kamara in that line of work, and in that style of running back. And if you look at, when McCaffrey got to the 49ers, even with the backs that they had, how much further he took that offense. So it's not, I know it's any running back can flourish in the system, but that's absolutely true. But this style of running back can take it to another level. And I have no doubt that Clint Kubiak knows had the expectation that Alvin Kamara is going to be there. So that was why Kamara is trying to exercise whatever leverage that he has. This is the last year he's going to be able to do that. But I completely understand where the Saints are right now, especially with kind of a bizarre scene like this. I don't think I've ever seen this before from any player where you show up, start practice, then all of a sudden leave practice before the full practice is set to begin. Kind of, like I said, a bizarre scene, kind of created a little bit of what's going on here. And like I said before, it's a calculated move. So now the Saints not only have to deal with that, but they got to be realistic about how much further they can guarantee money to Alvin Kamara, who by the time he steps on the field next year, 2025, will be 30 years old. And we know 30 years old when it comes to a running back is sort of when the cutoff line is in terms of where their production begins to dip. And at that point, would the Saints look to the draft to maybe get younger at that position, which I think is certainly a possibility. So the Saints have got to be very careful with this. There's some time. Mickey Loomis is the type, though, that he can be painfully patient when it comes to negotiations. I could see this lasting all the way to the start of training camp once we all pack our bags and head out to California and dipping into training camp back in 2020. Kamara had missed 4 or 5 practices when they were negotiating this contract, so this is not new ground for him. But like I said, back then he was a little more at the top of his market value. He could still play, he could still get it done. But the business side of things is the business side of things. And Alvin Kamara, being a football player, knowing this is his last chance to get paid, certainly has the right to exercise that leverage as well. So I'm just surprised this was kept under wraps for as long as it did. And it kind of it popped out today really out of nowhere in a fashion that's something we hadn't seen. Now, look, Alvin got a little bit of a mysterious personality sometimes. Sometimes you're not really sure what he's thinking. And I think that sort of played out today because we really had no idea what he was thinking because it certainly felt like he was having a good day Tuesday and a good day Wednesday, and then all of a sudden he checks out of practice early on Thursday. So just a crazy day all the way around, and Alvin Kamara's holdout is the new storyline as we get into this kind of summer break, and into training camp because I don't know how quickly they get this resolved, but deadlines and when football season starts, it kind of gets spurs action. So I think that's when we'll probably see a little more action pick up when it comes to this sort of contract negotiation.
Right, and Alvin Kamara may not be the same running back that he was in 2020 when he got this deal, but I feel you mentioned leverage. I feel like he's still got a fair amount of leverage because this team is not built right now to survive without Alvin Kamara. When you look at the running backs further down the roster, you've got Jamal Williams, and it was a small sample size, but we did get to see Jamal Williams last season without Alvin Kamara. He had 18 carries for 45 yards, no touchdowns against Tennessee, 9 carries for 29 yards, and didn't finish the game against Carolina in week 2. That wound up being the game Tony Jones Jr. came in and scored 2 touchdowns. So, again, small sample size, but Jamal Williams was not very effective as the running back 1 of the team last year. You go down to Kendre Miller, who a lot of people expect to take that leap forward. But the main question with Kendre is he ready? Is Kendre Miller ready to take 15 to 20 touches a game in the NFL if for whatever reason you don't have Alvin Kamara? Now, we did get to talk to Kendre Miller in the locker room today, and he said, and it kind of stuck out to me, he was very confident. He said that his goal for this season, he says he has 2 goals. Number 1, to stay healthy. Number 2, quote, to show everybody why the Saints drafted me. He said he never had surgery in his life before last season. He's hoping that's a one-off. He's to the point where he feels so confident in his body, he doesn't even think about the injury, about the knee or anything like that. He's excited to get back on track, and he's really excited for this season. So, but still, as the Saints, can you trust Kendre to take that leap? So right now, Alvin Kamara, when you talk about Clint Kubiak coming in and setting this system, the number 1 player that most people thought of is Alvin Kamara and how he can maybe have a kind of career resurgence with that system. So when you look at who's behind him on the depth chart right now, it's a fair question to ask is, can the Saints survive at that position without AK?
And I think that's what AK's banking on. Yeah. And I think that's what the Saints are in a little bit of a dicey situation here. If I know Loomis, he's going to look at the market value. He's going to look at the age. Alvin is a year older than Christian McCaffrey. And he's going to probably at some point respond, probably not as quick as Alvin would like. And then the negotiations will at some point reopen. But I think a holdout's possible. I really do think a holdout is possible, especially since he didn't hold out, but he didn't participate in OTAs. And who knows if this contract thing was one of the reasons why, not just not participating because he didn't want to be here, but because he was secretly holding out for a new contract extension. And does the calculated move, somewhat dramatic scene of him leaving practice in front of all of us in the media and exiting the building, and to where his head coach doesn't even know where he's at or the reason why he's gone and has to talk to reporters and doesn't know the actual reason at that point. Does that lead to any bad blood between them and the organization? I don't know. I think it probably could be resolved because this is all business. But if there were, could a trade be possible? I would put that off to the side right now because I still think the goal would be to get AK in this system happy so they can all get back to having success on the offensive side of the ball, because the offense, frankly, has been one of the things we've watched over the offseason that gives everyone genuine excitement about the season ahead, and Alvin Kamara is a key component in that new offense. And you're right, you can't just say throw anybody in there, even though this is a very running back friendly system. They could have success, but Kamara would have more success and be more dynamic and be more versatile and allow Kubiak to be more creative. And he's just an important part. So, given if he was like 26 or 27, I would think it would be a lot easier. But the fact that he turns 29, and he's had a little bit of dip in production, I just wonder if McCaffrey is the comp, both player wise, system wise, and in this case, most importantly, contract wise. How close do you get to a McCaffrey deal? If it's 2 years, $38 million, 19 per season, I just don't see the Saints going that 19 per season. They can structure it in a certain way to where it could look like a higher average base salary. But I do think that's where the concern comes, because Saints got to protect themselves, and they've already had to deal with over the last couple seasons of holding on to players past their prime due to past restructures that forces them to keep them on their books longer than they need to. And I just think the Saints are done with that. I really think the Saints want to be done with that. So could they be setting themselves up to do that exact thing yet again? That's a tough one. That's why I think, honestly, if you're the Saints, I wouldn't go anything past 2025, any kind of contract. Right. And if you got to guarantee a little more money in 2025, that might be where they ultimately find the sweet spot for Alvin Kamara. But we'll see. Stay tuned. This is far from over.
Yeah, because he's probably looking at his peers, because you remember that 2017 running back draft class. It's one of the best that we've seen in a long time. And
Absolutely.
To refresh you guys' memory, you had Leonard Fournette in that draft class. You had Christian McCaffrey, Dalvin Cook, Joe Mixon, Alvin Kamara, Kareem Hunt, James Conner, Aaron Jones, Joe Mixon. And about half of the guys I named, they're starting to kind of get pushed out the league. Leonard Fournette no longer in the league. Kareem Hunt is not a starting running back in the league anymore. Dalvin Cook, he was the fourth string running back for the Jets last year. Obviously, Christian McCaffrey is still flourishing. Joe Mixon just found a new team in Houston. Aaron Jones isn't exactly having the same kind of role he had in the past. He just got replaced by Josh Jacobs in Green Bay. James Conner still kind of holding on in Arizona. But that class of running backs, they're kind of outside of Christian McCaffrey, who's one of the greatest running backs in the last 10 years that we've seen. That class of running backs is kind of getting pushed out. Like, I agree. I think the $19 million a year that they gave Christian is probably a little too much, but like I said, Eckler just got $5.5 million a year. I think it's 2 years, about $11 million-ish total for Austin Eckler. I would say that's probably AK should make more than that.
Saints would jump all over that. They were able to get away with that contract.
Exactly.
2 years, $11 million. They would jump all over that right now.
You probably got to find a nice middle ground in between the two, because he's been producing a lot more than Austin Eckler has the last few seasons. But he's probably not at the level of what you would give a Christian McCaffrey, seeing what Christian has accomplished. So you kind of got to find a nice middle ground for the Saints. And I know if you're the Saints, you want to do that sooner than later, because you don't want this to be a storyline. You don't want this to be a headache or a distraction as you head to California.
But there is a little bit of a risk, though, for Kamara as well, because he is under contract.
Yeah.
He is under contract. So any move, he would have to get, if there was a quote-unquote trade, would have to be executed at some point if there was bad blood where they couldn't fix the relationship. But also, outside of maybe Denver, would anyone give him a McCaffrey deal? I think the most amount of money he's going to be able to get is right here in New Orleans.
I agree.
So
he's a 29-year-old running back.
Exactly, he's a 29-year-old running back, and he's coming off of like I said, productive seasons, but not as productive as he's been the early parts of his career. So as you can play the leverage hand, but you also got to realize that this is probably the spot where you're going to get paid the most, because if you were to get cut or whatever the case may be on the open market, I highly doubt you would come close to anywhere near a Christian McCaffrey deal, and you probably would be in the neighborhood of an Austin Eckler type deal if he somehow got into the open market.
Right, and Alvin Kamara, I'm sure at this point of his career, wants to play winning football. And when you look at the teams that are kind of at the top of the standings, a lot of them have their running back. Buffalo has James Cook. Kansas City has Isaiah Pacheco. Houston just got Joe Mixon. Miami has Mostert and Devon Achane. Maybe Dallas Cowboys are the only team that you might consider an elite team who doesn't have that one running back since they lost Tony Pollard. But the Eagles just bring in Saquon Barkley. Denver's got Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. Like, most of the elite teams that you would think of in this league have their running back, and they're not so desperate to where they're just like, oh yeah, we're going to throw $15 million a year at Alvin Kamara, who's going to be 29 by the time the season starts.
And it's also important to point this out as well. You go to the website Spotrac or Spottrack.com, where they do it all. It's the database for all the salaries. If you look at running back average salary, Christian McCaffrey's 1, Alvin Kamara's 2 in the league. So it's not like he's not fairly compensated. He's making good money and top of the market, other than Christian McCaffrey. So a lot of layers here, and I think it was just we just hadn't heard much about this. It really
out of left field,
flown out of the radar for such a high profile player. I remember the talk around him after the season ended was he going to get traded because of going in a new direction? Could he have some trade value? But clearly, once they brought Kubiak in, he clearly was a part of the plan. So this is both sides are going to have to really take a hard look at where they currently are and try to find some common middle ground, which they've generally been able to do with higher profile players. It's just a matter of, can they get it done with this, and how much is it going to cost, and how long do they commit to each other over the next couple seasons? Because look, Kamara is a realist. He knows he's almost done. I mean, he's probably got 2 really good years of football left, hopefully. But as we've seen, running backs, they tend to fall off a cliff when they hit a certain age.
Right, and I think Alvin Kamara might have the slight edge in the negotiations, number one, like I said, because everything that's behind him in the depth chart, there's a lot of uncertainty there. Number two, the hardest person to trade and get fair value back for is a guy that the rest of the league knows you have to trade.
Exactly.
If the rest of the league knows you have to move Alvin Kamara because the relationship's gotten so bad, not that it's gotten there yet, but let's say somehow it gets to that point. If the rest of the league knows you have to move Alvin Kamara, nobody's throwing a second or a third round pick at you for Alvin Kamara.
Absolutely
At
not.
age 29, like, you're looking at maybe a 6th round pick for Alvin Kamara.
And honestly, Saints, that doesn't work out for the Saints. You'd rather just hold on to
exactly.
him. But
That's not
if
worth it for the
Kamara's
Saints.
unhappy, then you got to cut him. But like I just said, if Kamara somehow gets to the open market, he ain't coming close to that kind of money. He's not coming close to that kind of money that he's currently under right now, and that he could potentially negotiate with the Saints. Because I think the Saints will come to the table with an offer. And I have no doubt Kamara's camp has a number in mind. And I'm sure they're looking right at Christian McCaffrey and saying that's what we want or close to it. So we'll see how close they get. Because if I'm the Saints, I'm probably not willing to go McCaffrey numbers, but I'm willing to maybe get close enough to where everyone can certainly be happy. And that's really what it's all about at this point.
And ideally for the Saints and for Alvin Kamara, because you saw we only saw him for 2 days, but even from day 1 to day 2, we saw him look more comfortable and take steps forward in this offense. You need him at training camp. The Saints want him at training camp. They don't want it. Dennis Allen does not want to have to answer questions every day about what's the update with Alvin Kamara. And Alvin Kamara would benefit from being at training camp and getting those live reps.
Absolutely.
I know he downplayed it and was like, I get the tape. I can watch practice I can watch the film. But getting able to actually get out there, be on the field, and get those live reps benefits Alvin Kamara, which ultimately would benefit the team. Both sides, I would think, would want to get this done before July 24th.
According to reports, they've been talking, but those extension talks haven't moved fast enough. And, Mickey's generally not the type, if he if he doesn't have to move fast, he's not moving fast. And I remember former Saints head coach talking about how it used to bother him so much because Mickey walks slow. He moves at his own pace. And Kamara made a statement today. He made a calculated move. Very few people in the NFL can do that. He certainly qualifies as one that can, given what he's done in the NFL and what he's done for this organization and certainly his resume. But there are some factors working against him as well. So hopefully this will have a peaceful ending and Alvin Kamara has a great year in 2024. That's crazy because honestly, we thought we were going to talk about Derek Carr today, Clint Kubiak today, which, by the way, Derek Carr closed out practice with a 4th down dime to Chris Olave. We thought we were going to talk maybe Taysom Hill today, who restructured. I thought another big deal was coming, like maybe another extension or another big signing of a free agent was coming because I didn't really see the need for the Saints to open up salary cap space. And then what's the one? Oh, Juwan Johnson.
Yeah, Juwan
having a surgery. And I was getting text all about that early this morning. But Alvin Kamara, rolling out of practice certainly trumped all, and that's our take on it. So we'll just see what happens with AK and the Saints. Anything else for us today?
Nope, because the last time I said what I was excited for moving forward, this happened. Because if you watch the last 2 podcasts, I was like, man, I'm so excited to talk to Clint Kubiak.
Yeah.
You better believe we're going to talk about Derek Carr and Clint Kubiak on Thursday, and that did not happen. So you know what? I got vacation coming up.
Well, good for
I'm
you.
going to take me a small vacation. And we'll be back on Monday.
All right. It was hot out there today, too.
Oh, man.
Another hot day. So, hot day both on the field and then pretty hot when it came to news, when it came to the New Orleans Saints. They are about to hit summer break. They'll return in California in about, 5 or 6 weeks.
Yep.
We'll be here, though. We'll be here for the time being, and should be fun. For Andre Johnson Jr., I am Sean Fazende. We'll catch you guys next time on Overtime.